Greetings, fellow RotoBallers. My name is Joey Christopoulos with my co-host, Tutty Guy Dave Rispoli. Welcome back to another edition, and this is the first edition of the 2021 Checkdown. Dave, welcome back, my friend. Now that we're doing things a little bit differently this year, per our lawyers, gave us some notices. We can no longer talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick and Derek Carr anymore. Even though Fitzpatrick's out for 8 weeks, he will come back to life. I promise you that. Dave, we're doing something a little bit different this year. We're talking about QB starts and sits, tight end starts and sits. How do you feel, man? It is the essence of the check down, the quarterback to the tight end.
Yeah, this is totally our wheelhouse, Joey. I'm excited to talk about tight ends finally, even though it's quite a love-hate relationship with tight ends, as we'll get to. Well, let's just kick it off right off the bat, Joey, with a check down special, a guy near and dear to our hearts. He's my start of the week, and a lot of people are probably feeling very trepidatious after last week's performance. It's Justin Herbert. It's Herbertle, man. This is a guy near and dear to our heart. We were all over him last season. Very highly drafted. If you're watching some of the other RotoBaller videos in the preseason, he was one of our busts because of where he was going, and we knew he was going to get off to a slow start, and week one, he did get off to a slow start. But I dove into the stats, and I kind of liked what I was seeing. I think there's some really good signs of life. First off, he could have had a much better day if it wasn't for his receivers dropping 7 balls. 2 of them were touchdowns, very unlike Keenan Allen. I don't think that persists throughout the year. Plus, though, one of the least pressured quarterbacks on Sunday, which is a huge step up from last season. So those additions to the O-line have really paid off. And Herbert was lights out on third down, 13 of 16, 160 yards, 11 first downs, and a touchdown. I like to see that. And he still led them to a W. Okay, let's not forget, they got a win against a very tough Washington D, and now he gets a Dallas defense that just got lit up in the opening game of this NFL season by, I get it, it's Brady, but there's still a lot of holes from last year that they did not fill with Micah Parsons. So I love Herbert this week.
And this is what's so fun about the beginning of the fantasy football season, right, is we're trying to read the trends a little bit. Right now, we don't have all the statistics and a lot of the things about these defenses from last year may not transfer over to this year. But the reason why we're going to talk about these players today, especially a guy like Justin Herbert, is we're just trying to see where the arrow is pointing heading into week 2 and trying to give them the most opportunity to help maybe get you the most fantasy points you possibly can on your team, which is why I like Jalen Hurts this week against the 49ers. I mean, let's just keep it very simple and basic, meat and potatoes. The 49ers just gave up 33 points to the Detroit Lions even after they blew them out. So even if they get up to a big lead, I still like Jalen Hurts to possibly, get some garbage yards, especially with those legs that we like a whole lot. And for overall for the season, I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts fan, but what was so great about week 1 was a lot of the question marks on that Eagles offense got answered a little bit, right? Dallas Goedert scored a touchdown. Maybe we talk about him a little bit later. Devontae Smith, the Heisman. Oh, he's too skinny. Had a great game. He was probably sitting on everyone's bench.
The Slim Reaper, one of the best nicknames there is out there. The Slim Reaper.
And now you can sort of think about putting the Slim Reaper into your lineup and, of course, a healthy Miles Sanders in the backfield doing what he did a couple years ago that made him a top 10 pick. Right now, this Eagles offense, I'd say the arrow's pointing up, which is why I would say Jalen Hurts is a start for me this week.
I love the call, Joey. And he graded out as PFF's number 2 quarterback yesterday. Yesterday. We're filming this Monday. So to us, it is yesterday on Sunday. So he looked great as a passer too, Joey. And here's another guy who did not look great as a passer,
and it delighted me.
The eye test, and it felt so good as a Bears fan.
Delicious.
But all that being said, I cannot see that continuing. There's no way Aaron Rodgers puts up less than 10 fantasy points again this season. I just don't see it happening. I'm starting Aaron Rodgers versus Detroit. Now, look, a few caveats. Aaron Rodgers last week looked like a guy who spent all offseason watching Jeopardy and hanging out in Cabo with Miles Teller. That's how he looked, okay? He didn't have much of a preseason. He didn't have much of a training camp. I mean, he looked like it.
He had a little margarita face. Yes.
He definitely did. He needs to cut the hair. He needs to get back to business. Well, look, Aaron Rodgers is a pro. He's a future Hall of Famer, first ballot, unquestionable. He's going to be talked about in the GOAT circles of quarterbacks for years to come. This is a guy that I just know he's going to come back with a vengeance. And it's the perfect matchup to do it. It's Monday Night Football. It's prime time, and it's against his old whipping post, the Detroit Lions. In the past 2 games he played against them, he threw 530 yards and 5 touchdowns, Joey.
Is that good, Dave?
That's 2 games worth. That's very good. An angry, embarrassed Rodgers is a very scary Aaron Rodgers. Sign me up for the bounce back.
Yeah, especially if he has the type of game that we're projecting right now, he's going to keep scoring those points in the Detroit Lions. Final starts, QBs. I'm going to throw a couple names at you, Dave. I just want to see your reaction. We kind of like all of these guys, but maybe you've got one that you like the most. I'm going to throw them at you right now. Baker Mayfield versus the Houston Texans. Jameis, 5-touchdown Winston versus Carolina. Kirk Cousins versus Arizona, or Matt Stafford, who just ripped up our Bears against Indy next week. If you can maybe pick one, we kind of like them all. Who's maybe the cream of the crop there?
Baker, touchdown maker for me. Look, he's playing the Houston Texans, who, I mean, might have been the biggest surprise of week 1. I mean, I had the Houston Texans losing in my eliminator pool. Didn't last long. I'm already out of that. But they just gave up 332 yards and 3 tutties to a rookie in his very first game. Baker broke the 300-yard mark, just couldn't get there with the touchdowns. Obviously, their whole game goes through Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I just don't see him being touchdownless in the box score again this week. I could definitely see him with Odell maybe suiting up again. Njoku coming out of 2 years ago and really emerging as a receiving option for them. I definitely like Baker Mayfield this week at Houston. But if I'm being honest, I like all those options, Joey. How about you?
I like all those options. I would say Jameis Winston's probably the one that I'd like to maybe see just a little bit more from when you pass for.
Well, you could see a little bit better if you get LASIK like Jameis did.
That's like him. Yeah, 148 yards, 5 touchdowns. You know, there's a lot of stats running out there that hasn't happened in a long time. Out of those other options, though, Stafford at Indianapolis, you know, he kind of showed it a little bit of what it's like when he plays in that Rams offense. They didn't get the running game going, but I can definitely see them racking up some passing yards. And let's be honest, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, what better than Kirk Cousins right now early on in the season? Had 49 pass attempts. Now he's going to play Arizona. They're going to have to keep pace the whole time. Those are all some pretty good options too as well, but I'm right there with you with Baker and maybe a close second, probably Stafford at Indianapolis. Hey, let's hit some tight ends, baby. Are you ready? The inaugural tight end start of the season from the checkdown?
Okay, kicking it off. Who we got?
Oh, well, obviously the big 5, right? We're talking Kelsey, Kittle, Hawkinson, Waller. They all kind of showed up in week 1. Mark Andrews. We're already doing those guys. They're already going into your lineups. But, Dave, I want to throw this one at you. Let's talk about Noah Fant on Jacksonville just real quick. 8 targets. You know, Jerry Jeudy.
You said on Jacksonville versus Jacksonville.
Oh, versus,
I just want to correct you because if I don't, the trolls will, Joey.
Thank you for keeping me clean on this one. Yeah, of course. Noah Fant versus Jacksonville next week. He had 8 targets in week 1. Jerry Jeudy looked great. Now he's out with a high ankle sprain, and so is probably the fantasy roster for the next month. I mean, I like him the most is probably my start. You know, what say you in terms of maybe some other tight ends that can be in their lineups this week?
Week 1, Joey, 5 tight ends with a target share north of 20% so far. Now, again, we are recording this. Let's timestamp this on Monday. So my guess is Waller will also be added to that list, maybe even Andrews. But it was Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, Noah Fant. Some good names to be mentioned with 8 targets last week. And he was heavily involved before Judy's injury. Now with Jeudy out, I think Teddy Checkdown is going to be looking early and often at Fant.
Another guy I want to talk to you about real quick was Kyle Pitts, taking on the Buccaneers this week.
Another guy on our bus list in the offseason, Joey.
Right, and a bit of a star-crossed fantasy week 1. You know, he saw some targets, had some opportunities, but, man, Matt Ryan did not look very sharp week 1. I don't really know what to expect from him week 2, but, Dave, we were talking about this earlier. What's so interesting about Kyle Pitts, and I think I'm maybe sort of coming around a little bit on it, is I do like continuing to start him in lineups because the dude is a wide receiver. I think he's being miscategorized right now. I think it probably will be changed next year. But right now he's listed at tight end. And if in any way you can have a wide receiver in that spot, as opposed to maybe some of the other dudes that we're going to have on our sit list coming up later, I think you got to keep still putting Kyle Pitts into lineup. So I like that a little bit further down the trough too as well this week in week 2.
Yeah, just like we were talking about before, you can't take week 1 as gospel. We think there's a bounce back from Herbert, from Rodgers. Here's a guy, you look at the box score, you're not in love with it, but you got to love 8 targets, which was tied for the team lead. He was right there with Ridley. I don't know what to expect with Matt Ryan. Arthur Smith coming in, I thought was going to be huge for them in the red zone. Didn't really look that way. Matt Ryan was on his back a lot. I think this is a little bit of a better matchup for them. But again, gotta follow the volume, right? So hopefully Kyle Pitts gets it done this week. If you drafted him, you probably spent a 4th or 5th round draft capital on him. You got to start him.
Yeah, just hang tight. I mean, as you mentioned, you spent that capital. Keep him in your lineups right now. Don't freak out or anything. It's still very early in the season, and we do think that he can have a little bit of a bounce back next week against the Buccaneers, especially if they're chasing points big time. Dave, talk to me about another guy that you like a whole lot, Tyler Higbee, heading into week 2. Tell us, the good folks, why you like him so much.
Yeah, speaking of volume, holy moly, was I wrong about Tyler Higbee? I should have way more Tyler Higbee on my teams because he led all tight ends in route percentages with 96%, which is up from 53% last year when, of course, he was splitting time with Gerald Everett. He looked the part. Stafford was looking to him early and often. He was running deep routes. He was over the middle. I loved what I was seeing between Stafford and Higbee. And we know Hawkinson had a great chemistry with Stafford. I really love this connection, and I'm not scared of this matchup at all at Indy. Just like we said, Stafford could be a good start this year, this week, and I really like Higbee.
Yeah, it's a great call. I think we were just sort of waiting to see, like, obviously Stafford in the past with Hawkinson, he's trusted the tight ends for many, many years throughout his career. Just want to make sure, does that connection actually really hook up? And I think we got Wi-Fi on that one, Dave. I think we got a clear signal. So I think you should definitely roll forward with him moving forward. We talked about Dallas Goedert a little bit already with Jalen Hurts, just another offensive weapon. So if you're rolling with Hurts, it's okay to probably roll with Goddard one more week. And then our final, I think, tight end starts. I want to ask you, Dave, let's talk about Cole Kmet just really, really quickly. Now, I'm not saying you got to start him week 2 against the Bengals. Of course you can if you want to, especially in deeper leagues. But I think it's safe to say after his week 1 performance that he should definitely be rostered, correct?
Absolutely, he should be rostered. If for some reason waivers have cleared and Cole Kmet is still on the waiver wire, he's absolutely worth a pickup right now. 7 targets. I mean, I don't think A-Rob has less than 7 targets in any more games moving forward. If that's the case, we're in a lot of trouble as Bears fans, but I really liked the way we were using Cole Kmet. It seems like Jimmy Graham really took that step back, which is what he needed to really shine. And he would have had a touchdown, Joey. We could be talking about Cole Kmet as like the number 1 waiver wire ad as far as tight ends are concerned right now, if he caught that touchdown and wasn't completely missed by Dalton. But I like the way we're using him. He's used a lot. You can't argue with 7 targets. You're going to be hard pressed to find a tight end on waivers right now who's averaging 7 targets a game.
Yeah, some of those concerns heading into the season we talked about right here on this show was, timeshare with Jimmy Graham that didn't really show up week 1, especially early on in the season, trying to get that veteran some of those snaps. Kmet's the guy. Had a very active performance. Clearly with Andy Dalton and the 1-2 step throw mentality of the Bears offense right now, they're sticking with Andy Dalton in week 2, which means good things for Cole Kmet moving forward. So I definitely think that he's a dude that can be streamed. You can play him in DFS, but at the very least, he should be rostered in lineups moving forward. Dave, it's time to move on to our quarterback sits. Now, this is usually when on the check down, we would build up, we would shine these turds to they're nice and bright and shiny. But now now we're actually able to be a little bit more objective and talk about some people that we just don't think should be in starting lineups. These guys can be used in 2 quarterback leagues, but the season's early. You're trying to win some games. Look, we're trying to just look at the trends right now. So it's hard to put Matt Ryan into lineups heading into week 2. It just didn't look great, right? He was off. Everything was disjointed. The offensive line didn't do him any favors. And now he's that, granted, just gave up a lot of points to Dallas. This can definitely happen with some garbage yards. I just feel like you're going to be gripping the remote control a little too tight starting Matt Ryan in your leagues this week. He's probably one of my sits for weeks.
Yeah, I thought the addition of Arthur Smith was going to be huge for them. Maybe it's taking a little bit more for them to install that offense. They did not look great at all. And the biggest concern for me was in years past, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, they had some of the most air yards and the best, deepest ADOT of any wide receivers. Week 1, Matt Ryan's ADOT is 4.5 yards. He's not exactly looking downfield. That really worries me. And this is one of those situations where if you have Matt Ryan, most likely you drafted another quarterback. If you have another option, maybe we'll get to some of those names. I just can't see you starting Matt Ryan with confidence. He's a guy that if you're starting, I mean, you probably lost last week. You can't start 0-2. You can't do that in fantasy leagues, especially not 12-team leagues. It's too high of a hill to climb. You got to look elsewhere. You got to look for someone with a little bit more upside. He's got to prove it to you. And another guy that's got to really prove it to me before I start him is a guy I drafted way too much of. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I have you know I have a lot of Ryan Tannehill. Now I'm not ready to bail yet. Okay. We talked about Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, leaving them and what that may have been doing to that offense. Definitely didn't like what I was seeing out of Ryan Tannehill. I'm definitely a little spooked. Something didn't look right. He took 6 sacks. Granted, 5 of them were from Chandler Jones. So he won't have to face Chandler Jones every week. So I guess that's a positive. But he also fumbled twice. He couldn't get Julio Jones going. Julio Jones dropped 2 passes. A.J. Brown was doing A.J. Brown things, but still only 4 catches for him. Derrick Henry didn't have a big game. I'm nervous, Joey. Okay. He's going into Seattle, a place that has one of the loudest stadiums with the 12th man. I'm not liking the vibes so far. I drafted Tannehill because of his easy early schedule. And now I'm looking at it going, week 1 was supposed to be the cakewalk. Now we're going to Seattle. Oof, I'm starting to look at the waiver wire myself.
Yeah, and it's early enough in the season, especially playing a team like Seattle where you're like, hey, you know, Russell Wilson just lit up the scoreboard in week 1. But, man, Seattle plays games that are 10-7 in the fourth quarter better than anybody else, and that can easily turn into that scenario. And, look, let's be very clear. We're not saying by end of season Matt Ryan won't put up top 12 numbers or that Ryan Tannehill won't be able to justify the status that he was picked up. I'm just saying we're kind of just looking at the trends once more time. We're going to say it again. And right now might not be the best time to either sit him or, of course, if you have to play a guy like Ryan Tannehill, we're telling you temper your expectations for week 2 while maybe they iron out a few of the wrinkles that are going on with their offense right now. Speaking of that, obviously, let's talk about one more. It's a buyer beware situation. This is a matchup, Dave, that, look, you know, maybe in preseason got people a little bit excited, and one of these guys is a surefire QB1 that you took very early in drafts, but I think we're both saying maybe just temper your expectations before you expect a huge bounce back. It's this Dolphins-Bills game coming up in week 2. Tua, you know, they already said after the game there was cornerbacks on the Patriots. I think it was J.C. Jackson saying, you know, after his first look, we knew exactly what he was going to do, which is basically just put the ball up into the Dolphins receivers' hands. The word might be out a little bit on Tua. I think he's definitely a sit. And after the performance from week 1 with Josh Allen, you know, outside of Stephon Diggs, there wasn't really a whole lot there that they could hang their hat on. I get it. They just played a very tough Steelers defense, but the Dolphins defense is pretty good too itself. I'm not saying sit Josh Allen, but I'm also maybe saying temper your expectations that he might not be able to put up the stud numbers that you were expecting for him in week 2.
This was one of the knocks on him coming into this season of going as high as he was, going as a 3rd round quarterback was. We kind of only saw him put it together as a passer in 1 year. So I was a little nervous. To me, he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's a guy that you look at and you go, this guy could be the next Stafford. He could be the next Jay Cutler. Like, we don't really know who Josh Allen is yet. And completing 30 of 51 pass attempts makes me a little nervous, even against the Steelers defense. He's facing another great secondary in the Dolphins. The Dolphins had a great year last year that seems to be carrying over that momentum into this year. They have a great secondary. This makes me a little nervous. Now, obviously, you spent a 3rd or 4th round pick on Josh Allen. You probably don't even have a backup quarterback roster. You're not going to start someone over Josh Allen. But this comes into the technique of fantasy football. Maybe you have Josh Allen and you're looking at your opponent and you're going, okay, I got to face Kyler Murray this week or somebody that's going to put up massive points to Dak Prescott. Maybe this is when you have to start Josh Allen, but you're looking for a little more sex in the flex, Joey.
Oh, wow.
That means starting, trying to start someone who has a much higher ceiling because, Josh Allen just may not get there this week. Maybe that comes back with the rushing yards. Hopefully, I mean, their running game is an absolute mess. Their running backs are just a who's who of bad running backs right now. But definitely this makes me scared. Just the matchup as a whole. On the other side, you mentioned Tua. Don't love Tua this week. He's the guy that I have a lot of in a lot of leagues. That's my second quarterback, and he will not be seeing my starting lineup anytime soon.
Yeah, he's definitely kind of leaning on, can Jalen Waddle make an amazing play, who looked really good in week 1? And look, yeah, Allen's probably going to go on and have a great season, but in terms of tournament style, which Dave, you love playing every single weekend, Allen might not be worth that price to head into the starting lineup. Dave, let's wrap it up right now. We're going to do our tight end sits, but first we're going to pause for a 4-second freeze frame while our good man Sean Engel just lists all the tight ends that we don't like. There you go. That was the whole list right there.
That should have been all of them not named Travis Kelce. Hawkins, like literally just put all of the tight ends on every team. Okay.
Exactly, Dave. And we're going to throw some names out there right now. These aren't big surprises, but a lot of these guys are probably dudes that you took in, the 12th, 13th, 14th round. You wanted maybe either, some tight end coverage, or maybe you just waited on tight end. And look, some of these guys, we just don't think they're going to be able to post huge numbers. I mean, Dave, where do you want to start, my friend? I'll let you take the floor. Just pick one out of this huge basket here.
Well, we were just talking about the quarterback. We were just talking about the game. Let's go right to his tight end, Mike Gesicki, a guy that I was pretty high on coming into this year, but then I started to get scared off of him in the preseason when I saw his snap count, him splitting reps with other tight ends, Shaheen getting more cover, or Adam Shaheen getting more playing time than him in the preseason. And now all of a sudden, some guy named Durham Smythe. Yes, Joey, Durham Smythe outsnapped Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki only played 20 of 52 snaps, 2 targets for a big old goose egg. So that's his floor, which is nothing. Just like every other tight end, I thought he was maybe going to be a guy that could really merge. He's an athletic freak like a Hawkinson, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Maybe not this year. He's a guy, if you have him and you need someone like a running back because you just got a Gus Edwards injury or something, he's a guy I would drop. If he's your backup tight end, don't hold on to him. He'll be on waivers. He'll be able to play matchups in the future. But until his snap count goes up, he's not going to find a way on my team. Joey, who are you sitting?
Well, this is one of those situations where I like the player, I like the situation, but right now I'm kind of calling a waiver wire fugazi out there, Dave. I watched Donnie Brasco the other night. I'm smelling a little bit of a fugazi.
You watch it every night, and I love that about you, Joey.
I'm going with Gerald Everett on Seattle. Only 2 targets. Did catch that touchdown. So when you're maybe looking at your waiver wire this week, or you're looking at your lineup, you're like, oh, well, he actually probably did okay, pretty decently. But I think the jury's still out a little bit on whether it's Gerald Everett or whether it's Will Dissly in that offense. Russell Wilson does love a tight end, but it seems like whether it's, Jacob Hollister or Greg Olsen every single year, it's kind of a rotating mix. Does Everett have the most talent? Yes, but he didn't really get the target share. That is a little deceiving in terms of fantasy points when you're thinking about putting him into lineups. I'm just saying I'm not fully sold yet on him being a tight end 1 in Seattle situation, so he's a little bit of a sit for me as well in week 2.
Yeah, absolutely. He's another guy whose snap count percentage has to go up for me right now. It's a dead even split between him and Will Dissly. And in another situation with a kind of murky 2 tight end set, it feels like someone, the bigger name has gotten usurped, Joey. And I'm talking about Austin Hooper and David Njoku. Austin Hooper, a guy who was probably being drafted in the late rounds as like a tight end 2 type. David Njoku probably not being drafted. He's a name you may recognize from a couple years ago. This may be because Odell didn't play, but David Njoku ran 16 routes. Austin Hooper only 14. Njoku 5 targets. Austin Hooper only 3. And Baker was looking for Njoku. And this is a tight end who got drafted with really high draft capital. This is a tight end who at one point we were talking about kind of like a Kyle Pitts. I mean, this is an athletic freak in David Njoku. This might be the reemergence. This might be his Logan Thomas 3rd year swan song. It takes a while for tight ends. We could be looking at that right now. I'd much rather roster David Njoku than Austin Hooper. So right now, Hooper's a big sit for me.
Yeah. Oh, who knew? The tight end situation is still a mystery box outside of those 4 or 5 easy to start options on the weekly. But that's what this show's going to be here to help you do just that. Dave, before we get out of here, I want something. We go a little off the board for real quick.
Okay.
I want to get your take real quick on because we were on this show very recently. We called him a bust in the preseason. Week 1, he came out. This dude's a Hall of Famer and played amazing in Week 1. Where are you still on Rob Gronkowski? Because I'm not fully buying that on a 17-game season, this guy is going to be the amazing tight end one that everyone wants him to be heading into this Week 2.
Well, real quick story. Early Sunday morning, I had Raheem Mostert. This is before he got injured. Someone was trying to trade me Gronk coming off a big Thursday night game for Raheem Mostert. I said, get out of here. What are you, crazy? Hindsight now, with Raheem Mostert out 8 weeks, I should have done it. But I don't think...
It's such a funny trade. That trade could be from 2015, 17. Yeah, that's a great trade.
Here's the reason why I stayed away from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at their price this year is I think it's going to be 2 of their games every week. I don't think they're going to put up as many points as they did against Dallas every single week. I think their defense is going to really shore things up as the season goes along. Maybe Brady doesn't have to throw it 600 times like he did last week. And I think, some weeks Gronk will emerge. Some weeks there's going to be those weeks. Other weeks it's going to be Mike Evans and Godwin, or Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin, or Scotty Miller out of the woodwork. And let's not forget OJ Howard's still on the team. There's no way they play Rob Gronkowski that much. There's no way they want to put him in that much danger if they're really have their eyes set on another Super Bowl run.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because that's why I don't like him from a fantasy perspective of, he's going to put up weeks like this Week 1. And, man, the fact that it happened in the first week really, I think, kind of tips the scales of everyone buying in on him moving forward, like you're saying, seeing him in trades. And I think the Buccaneers would be so stupid to run him out and have him doing seam routes all 17 games, right? They need that dude. When he's right, they win football games. So when do they want to win football games? In January. I still think he's going to be a very frustrating fantasy asset at times, where 1 week he's going to give you what he gave you Week 1, and then another week he's going to get 1 target, and he'll be healthy. They just won't use him because they want to preserve him. I'm right there with you.
If there's one thing I respect that guy in my fantasy league, he's doing what you should be doing if you own Rob Gronkowski. You have approximately 2 days left to trade Rob Gronkowski at possibly his highest price coming off a huge Thursday night game. I just don't foresee that continuing week in, week out. So, hey, find the Davis Bowl in your league who's got a couple running backs, went robust running back, and, offer him a trade.
Go to Durham Smythe. Pick up Durham Smythe. And just,
or O'Shaughnessy from the Jaguars. There's too many tight ends. It's very frustrating. Sit them all. That's my final answer. Sit them all.
But you know what, Dave? That's what this season's going to be all about on the check down. It's going to be about quarterbacks, and it's going to be about finding those tight ends. They're going to hopefully get you those fantasy points to win your league this year. This was this week's The Checkdown. Week 2 version of quarterbacks start sits, tight ends start sits. It's early in the season. We're just looking for trends right now. We're just reading the tea leaves and seeing which the arrows are pointing up and pointing down. So hopefully this video was informative for you. My name is Joey Christopoulos. My co-host, Tutty Guy, Dave Rispoli. Dave, throw out your socials for everyone that's watching this video so they can follow your content elsewhere.
Yeah, all my fantasy football content is at Tutty Guy. That's me. So you can follow me there on Twitter. And, I'm not doing the gram, guys. I won't do it.
He hates the stories. He just can't stand it. It's a story. It's a story for another time. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram at Joey Sports Guy. This was the check down on RotoBaller. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Make sure you please comment, ask questions in this video right below you right there. We will reply. We will do the best we can to do the homework for you so you can set the best lineup that you can for week 2. Also, check out all the wonderful videos that are also on this page right now as we get you ready for NFL week 2 with all great information that's going on. And go to rotoballer.com too as well, because we got up to the minute date on news, injuries, stats, all that good kinds of stuff. Dave, the season is rocking and rolling. We're in a new place right now. We're talking tight ends. We're talking actually good quarterbacks this year. It feels good, man. Great show. Great to see you.
Thank you, my friend. And don't forget to put those start comments, questions, and concerns down below. We will for sure answer them. We're here for you to win that league.
Thanks for watching this video. Special thanks out to Sean Angle, who always does an amazing job cutting not just our video, but other videos all around the RotoBaller universe. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Go out there, win that league next week.